All right, let's see. I'm gonna go live here and then on Instagram too. So let's see. How do we get this all set up here? Cool, cool. Well, I think we're live on both. Awesome. Let's see. Make sure this is all dialed in. Yo, what's up, Coiled Crew? Hope you guys are doing well. We are officially live on both YouTube and on Instagram right now, which is sick. So hope you guys like my background. Just Legoland for my backdrop. But no, this is sweet. What up? What up? No, I just wanted to talk about a few different topics. So we're live on Instagram, YouTube, and I just dropped last week, or about a week ago, I just dropped the naturalistic enclosure video on the YouTube channel, and it only took me about 3.5 years to get through all of that. But so far the feedback's been really good. I've had actually Universal Rocks reached out to me. Stuart, the owner, actually gave me a call. I need to call him back, but he was really impressed with the build outs, which was great. He actually watched the full video, which is really cool. So um, overall, like I said, the feedback on the enclosure build video was great. I got a number of questions about some specifics with that, and I apologize. There should have been probably more specifics, just in terms of some of the nitty gritty details in building those out. I reached out to Mark over at Jungle Cages initially, and the cool thing about Mark is he can build out these enclosures like exactly how you want them in terms of dimensions. So, normal PVC enclosures, from my experience and talking to other people, those will break down pretty quickly in some cases. Sometimes they work out great. But the reason why I went with Mark over at Jungle Cages is because he uses ABS plastic and he chemically welds all these enclosures together. So a lot of people ask me, like, oh, where'd you get your setups or enclosures? It's like I got the actual enclosures built by Mark, and then I went in and built the backgrounds using Rocks material. And overall, that was just a great experience kind of going through that. It took a ton of time. I mean, I think I said in the video it was over 100 hours. It was probably closer to 200 hours, honestly. But no, it was great. I think just kind of moving forward, if people have questions or want help with their naturalistic builds, like feel free to shoot me a DM. More than happy to give you some pointers, because there is definitely a learning curve. And with Universal Rocks, they're great. They do a ton of different massive, zoo builds and stuff like that for people, but the details can sometimes be missed. And so if you're looking at building something like that, hopefully that video gives you some good reference points to kind of work off of, and learn from some of the mistakes that I made. But yeah, overall they're holding up great. 3.5, going on 4 years later, and I do not regret building those out. I think they're definitely a hit when people come over or new people want to come check out the snakes. And so I'm really glad I kind of went through all of that. Now moving forward, that's kind of the next question about, what do I do moving forward? Because now I'm looking at getting some hatchling racks. If everything goes right with breeding season, I'm, hopefully get a clutch or two this year. And so racks for hatchlings, but then what do I do with some of my larger females? Because they're gonna need more space. They're gonna need probably 6 foot enclosures here relatively soon. So do I go and I build out, you know, 4 or 5 6 footers like I did on the Universal Rock side, or with the 4 footers, I should say? That's kind of the question I'm debating. I want to do it, but I just know how much time and effort kind of goes into it. So I might do a simpler version of kind of what I built on these, just because that texture, the background is just so good for them when they're shedding, and I've seen them utilize it almost every time when they shed. So It is a really, and it looks really good. It looks really, really cool. So I think I'm gonna probably end up going through with that, and hopefully Universal Rocks can give me a good deal because I've given them a lot of publicity and free promotion. So I would love a sponsorship at maybe at some point. But anyway, so if you guys haven't seen the enclosure build out video yet, go check that out. Especially if you're looking at getting some new enclosures at some point and wanting to mix things up. Nothing against people that don't do naturalistic. There's a lot of people that do bioactive. That's kind of the next, that's kind of the next level, I would say. Or just kind of basic setups. I mean, that's cool too. Easier to clean for sure. But for me personally, I wanted to kind of go above and beyond to start. And so we'll see. We'll see. I definitely am excited to see kind of what we end up doing and deciding. It also just kind of depends on some of the time that I have. I had a little bit more time 4 years ago than I do today, is how I feel. But switching gears a little bit, wanted to talk about breeding, not just breeding, but how to vet a breeder. So, we have some really great breeders in the space. I would say more often than not, you're going to find a good breeder, but there are those cases where you want to definitely do your own vetting and figure out, is this somebody that I want to buy from? And with breeding season here, we're going to have a ton of new animals hit the market in the next, you know, 4 to 6 months. And so I would say, some of the things or questions that I would ask if I was buying my first animals now or in the near future are as follows. Like, I'd be asking to see their setups. Like, what do their snake rooms look like? Are they keeping a decently clean environment? Are the setups? Is there enough enrichment for their animals? Like, are they just keeping a rack system? Everybody does things a little bit differently, and I wouldn't say any of those things are necessarily terrible outside of poor living conditions. But I think ultimately being able to see someone's setups is going to tell you a lot about how much they care about their animals. And that's a really good place to start. That's a really good kind of foundational point to start. The other thing is too is transparency. So if they're not willing to share lineage information or show pictures of mom and dad, or even beyond that, if they have it, that's a massive red flag. I would definitely not be buying, especially if you're looking at super dwarf stuff and percentages. You have to make sure that you're getting as accurate information as you possibly can. Now, if you're going crazy and you're going to be a crazy customer and be like, hey, I need to see importation docs from 10 years ago, like, those don't exist. I think the only person that really has true importation documents is Wolfgang and Rodney. And so anybody that's claiming that they have these crazy imports and whatever, or wild caughts, it's like, you want to track down the source. Like, where did those animals come in? And usually it's going to be through somebody like Rodney or Wolfgang, or I forget the other name of the guy that was importing a lot in down in Florida. But yeah, so vetting a breeder is going to be important on the lineage side, especially if you're wanting to push percentages. And then the other thing I would look at, and once again, we're living in a very digital age, and so moving forward, it's like, do they have a website? Do they have a digital footprint or social media proof? Right? If you're trying to buy a super dwarf off of Craigslist, it's going to be a massive issue across all the fronts that I've already kind of talked about. So um, you want to make sure that people are actually legitimate. They're real people. They're not taking mainlands from somebody else that they got, that they said were super dwarfs, and buying those off of some random site. I don't see it as much in retics, but obviously in like ball pythons and some other niches, there's a lot of just pure scamming going on too. So just beware of that. And it's always good to ask for references as well. So you know um I can say for myself, once I have hatchlings available, babies available, and customers, I'm going to proudly share those those experiences with other customers as well. And you got to be transparent in terms of the experience, and you want to give people a good experience. That's the other thing is I just remember the first time I was buying my first animals and how stoked and like over the moon I was. And I just can't imagine having like a really bad experience on that front and just kind of putting the fire out. That would have been a shame. So yeah, I mean, just go through kind of the typical business to business or customer to business vetting process on that front. And then the other thing too, there's a lot of kind of newer breeders popping up. And so, getting cross-referencing and figuring out where their animals came from and who they're kind of tied to and who they're working with, I think is important because there's a lot of newer breeders coming up right now that have some amazing projects and amazing animals, and they haven't bred yet, including myself. So not to toot my own horn, but that's kind of where we're at in the market, because back in 2019, 2020, 2021, there was this massive boom. Now, a lot of those keepers and breeders have gotten out for one reason or another, or they're just keeping as pets. They're not planning on breeding anymore. But there's a lot of people that bought some amazing animals during that time, and those animals are now becoming sexually mature to where they're going to be breeding and they're going to be making some really killer stuff. So an example of that is like I think I brought this up on the podcast with Rodney, but Jesse Serrano's got some het genetic stripe stuff that he could possibly hit like an albino super sun genetic stripe, which would be crazy. And then I think it's 50% super dwarf. So, we've got people that are coming up. And so that's another reason why we're doing the next gen podcast, is because we want to give people the opportunity to share what they have, who they are, what their brand is, what their kind of mission statements are, what they're wanting to do. And so I think that's that's really, really important. But I'm gonna just go through some of the comments here. Those importation docs are accurate. They aren't accurate. Okay. Sorry, Nick. I'm trying to read through what you said. Importation docs. Yeah, it's interesting because even with the importation docs, I mean, if you boil back or go back to where those animals were picked up, I mean, there could be even some discrepancy there. And so that's why I've also said, if there are people in the space that are saying, hey, this animal for sure, if it looks like this, is from Kalatoa or from Madu, if it looks like this, like it has a specific look. And honestly, a lot of those island localities look very, very similar. And if you threw them in a pile, it'd be very difficult to tell. So, you know, what I'm trying to get at though with that is, if it's a super dwarf and it has a particular look, and you're going for a particular look because of the polygenic traits that it carries, that should be kind of the focus. And if it's a super dwarf, if it's Kalatoa, Madu, Karampa, um, if it's a mix, 50-50, overall, what's the goal of owning those animals in the first place, right? Outside of they're awesome and amazing, it's the size piece. So, if you're working super dwarf blood into your projects, I mean, that's really all that kind of matters, in my opinion. So, um, anyway, so that's kind of interesting. And I think right now, kind of where we're at with a lot of the keepers, a lot of the breeders, there is a really heavy focus on, keeping focusing on the projects that you're really passionate about. And I think that needs to continue to be kind of the focal point, because what I've seen is, I went to Retic Fest. I went out and went to Reach Out Reptiles facility. This is back in 2022. So this is over 3 years ago. And I don't know how many people were there at the time. I want to say there was at least 80 to 90 people at least there. And almost all of them own retics or super dwarfs or whatever. And I can probably count on two hands the amount of people that are actually seeing those same projects through. And that just kind of shows you the drop off rate of people that are coming in and saying, hey, I want to invest, or I want to buy all these amazing animals. And so when people get worried or want to kind of gatekeep projects or not talk about things or, oh, this is so secret or whatever. It's kind of dumb because there's just not people that are going to focus on certain projects as hard as you. And most people aren't, I should say. 95% of the people that might be kind of interested in a project, I would say don't see that project through. So when you're looking at competition or you're looking at just the overall general market, I think it's kind of dumb to look at it that way. So ultimately, I'm excited, and um, I think just kind of with the direction of everything and the conversations that we've been having on the Next Gen Retic podcast and some of the different things that we've been doing there has been really, really fun. And I've been learning a ton. I've been learning quite a bit about some of the history of the Superdorf side of things, locality side of things, and it's a lot of education. And that's another thing people don't really, I think, grasp or understand is understanding, you know, codoms and recessives and how the genetics work, and then how percentages work with superdwarfs. Like, if you take a mainland to a superdwarf, that's the babies are going to be 50% mainland, 50% superdwarf. And then what is going where's kind of the direction of the retic market going, and that's high percentage stuff. And we've talked about it quite a bit too on the podcast, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about just general socialization strategies for your animals, for your babies, for any new keepers or breeders out there. One thing that I did pull away from Garrett that I think is really good is just handling those babies a ton and getting them very used to different scenarios. I mean, I think obviously you don't want to hurt your animals by any means, but being able to put them in environments where their heads, their eyes, like, they're getting flipped over, they're getting socialized a ton at a very early stage in their lives makes a massive difference. And I'll just tell you from my own personal experience, the only animals that I really have an issue with or aren't super comfortable being handled are the ones that I picked up at, 2 or 2.5 years old, with my Coyote female kind of being an exception to that. So, my recommendation always is buy hatchlings, especially if you have kids, and especially if you're new to retics, like buy hatchlings, raise them up. You kind of can grow in your experience as your animals are growing. And if they're, decent to high percent super dwarf, they're going to grow at a relatively slower rate versus like a mainland. Um, I've got my mainland hypo male that I swear he grows like 6 inches every few weeks. So I see the massive contrast and difference. And so anyway, that's kind of exciting. I'm trying to think where I put my where did I put my oh, here it is. I was gonna talk too just a little bit about I was gonna talk too just a little bit about an underrated animal that I have that I've talked about a little bit, but I'm really excited for her because she was born in February of 2022. So she's from Reach Out Reptiles, but I believe this was a joint breeding with Richard Bilbo. And I just found out that he lives in Richfield, which is only like an hour and a half south of me. So I'm gonna have to hit up Richard and maybe we can meet up or I can stop by his place because I've got two descendants, two Richard Bilbo line animals essentially. So this female, she is, and I'd pull her out if I hadn't fed big meals yesterday, but um she's from clutch 22003. So this was February of 2022. The sire was an Annery. Um the sire was an Annery male, 75% Madu, 25% Kalatoa. And then the female was a double het purple Annery, and she was 75% Kalatoa, 12.5% Jam. So I have a female visual anery that is 87.5% super dwarf and 6.25% jam. So that comes out to what, like 94% super dwarf, visual anery female. And she, what's interesting about her when we talk about color and pattern. The second half of her body almost looks like a tiger. Um, Obviously, there's no tiger in the pairing or anything like that, but I've always wanted to make Anery tigers, and so I think that's going to be one of the potential directions. But also, she is a posset purple, so I would want to prove her out and see if um, she's a albino carrier as well. So anyway, she's kind of flying under the radar, but I'm hoping potentially this time next year she gets enough size on her to where we can look at potentially breeding her, because that'd be really cool to figure out if she's a if she's het albino. But yeah, she's one I don't talk about it much, but she's really nice looking. She's super silver, kind of bluish purplish, kind of has those hues. And then, like I said, the pattern, the reason why I picked her out of the clutch, and Joe was working at Reach Out at the time, going through all the pictures. And if you go on Reach Out's page, it's that clutch from 2022 CL22003. You can kind of look. I was going to actually look up what her exact number was so you guys could find her. But anyway, I picked her out because she had the most contrast by far. Uh, just on her dorsal pattern, everything like that. And I just thought that was going to be really, really good to translate to Anery tiger stuff or albino stuff, and just keeping that pattern in place. And so, once again, like if you look at a clutch from top to bottom, I think, and you're looking to pick out an animal out of a clutch, those are the type of things that you can do. And you can even go, and I'm trying to think where there's a bunch of clutches. I think Reach Out, I know rnbreptiles.com or Rodney's website, I think, does it. I have to double check. Reach Out, they stopped doing it, but they would post full clutches as well. But I think it's a good practice, especially if you're an aspiring breeder, to look at the full clutch, look at all the animals, and look at, okay, what traits do these certain animals have? Because there is quite a bit of variety and variance, even if they're all normals, right? You can slowly start picking out the ones that have more black, right? Or more chaotic dorsal pattern. And being able to do that, once you do that kind of over generations, you're going to just amplify those genetics and be able to have more of a predictable outcome as well. So if you're going for the craziest marbles, you look at some of the, go and find maybe a Karampa that has that broken up neck pattern and overall dorsal pattern, but then find the craziest one out of that clutch and pick that one out, right? So that's, I think, what I'm most looking forward to about breeding is obviously producing some really cool animals, and having and raising some of those animals up, but also going through the clutch and figuring out, okay, in all reality, which ones are going to be the best ones to hold back. And what does that process look like for the future of what we're wanting to do. So anyway, that was kind of my underrated animal of the day. But ultimately, I'm just really excited. I thought one of my females, my Coyote female, was cycling 2 months ago or so, and I think I just jumped the gun. I think it's interesting though, because throughout the year, normally, I'd feed all my animals, and almost all my animals would go to the hot spot, or to the near their heating pad, right? And what I've noticed is that as temperatures have come down out here in Utah, that a couple of my females that are older, so my female Coyote, my pure Superdor female from Daniel Solis, some of these females that are getting, I think, close to their first year of breeding, even after a large meal, they'll go to the cool side. And they've been doing that for the last, 6 weeks or so. And so I'm hoping that we're getting close, and that's kind of a sign. And like I said, that's just something that I've noticed um, relatively recently. And it really points to some of the points that Rodney has brought up on a couple of the podcasts, or even just this previous one, where we talk a lot about what are the key indicators to a female starting to ovulate, starting to cycle. And It can be food response for sure, but one of the variables most definitely is season, so time of year, and then temperature drops, right? And so there's kind of this cooling down period that happens, late fall into winter that does something to a lot of these females. Now you have some outliers as well, but I think, and from his experience and what he talked about, there was, with early, if there's a female that goes early, that typically means that she's going to slug out because for whatever reason, it's just not a healthy clutch. There's not enough time for the female to cool down or the male to cool down to have viable sperm so that she takes on that. And so, I'm just continuing to learn. And once again, being kind of a noob here on the breeding front, really trying to understand what are those indicators, what should I be looking for. And it's tough, like when you've never bred before and you think something's happening, you're watching super close and you're like, is this happening, is this normal behavior, is this new behavior? It can definitely be a little bit tricky, but I'm confident that once I've done this a couple times, and hopefully that happens this year, we get a couple females that are able to go, then it'll be much easier in years to come. But overall, like I said, just very excited for what we have going on here. I've got I'm trying my super phantom male is growing really, really well. He's growing like a weed. So shout out to Andrew for teaming up with me on the cow project. I'm excited to see cows if it's this year or sometime next year. It doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to enjoy the process. And on the percentage side, I think the highest percent, now correct me if I'm wrong out there, if somebody knows of higher percent cows, just general cows, I think 62% cows have been made. I know Rick O'Neill, I don't know how the percentages worked with Rick O'Neill's, but he hit like 67% cow, I guess, a year or two ago. A lot of those animals from that clutch, I think, passed away. I think he only has maybe one or two animals left. So I'm excited either way. If it's even just on the percentage side to be near the top of that front is really exciting to me. So we'll see what happens. 68.75% cows is the goal, and I know there's a lot of other people that they're kind of hovering between that 50% OGS head OGS side for the one side of the cow maker, formula. And then on the phantom side, there's been people that have produced, I think Dylan over at Clarity Creations has an 87.5% Anri Phantom. So, I mean, he's up there on the Phantom side, and that's a lot of Andrew's stock too. Andrew did a lot of work on the cow project and the phantom side especially, but the OGS side still hasn't caught up when it comes to the Superdorf percentages. So it'll be really fun and interesting. I think the next like 3, 4, 5 years when it comes to the cow project is going to be really fun. And my goal is to make high percent stuff and make them readily available. And the market will adjust. I think in the beginning they'll definitely be pricey, but I look forward to the day where we can make a bunch of really high percent cows that stay relatively small, manageable sized, and are fun to keep. I've always wanted a cow. I know Garrett. I think he sold. What was it? I think he had 250 percenters back in like 2021 era time frame that he sold for quite a bit of money. But I just haven't seen those percentages being pushed up quite yet. And I know there's somebody else, I forget who it was, that is on track to making 50% golden child cows, which is kind of that next level, bringing golden child into it. So that will wipe out the yellow on those animals, which is really fun. So anyway, ultimately, I'm just overall excited for some of the projects I'm in and working on. um, I think I'm definitely going to go down the albino path a little bit too. So white snakes, all white snakes, super phantom stuff, cow stuff, albino stuff, potentially snow stuff, and And yeah, we'll see. I mean, had hypo stuff, so we'll see how that stuff looks if there's anything that happens there. So anyway, I'm just overall excited, and we love and appreciate everybody that has supported us, and we've just had massive support, and we're excited for kind of what's to come. So, and if you guys are watching this and you haven't joined our Facebook group, the Next Gen Retics Pod or Next Gen Retics group on Facebook, feel free to join in there. I mean, I think we're really trying to build a community where um, it's an open forum discussion. People don't have to always agree, but I think the people in that on that page and in our community really have kind of a lot of the same views, and I think a lot of people are kind of sick of some of the misinformation that has come out about these animals over the last number of years, and I think everyone's kind of coming to the reality of once again how amazing these animals are. Number one, but then number two, what the reality is on the keeping side, on the breeding side, on the business side, and it's an exciting time to be in retics in general, locality stuff, super dwarf stuff, and anyway, it's exciting. But I appreciate you guys. Feel free as well if you want to come on the podcast, shoot me a DM or shoot the Next Gen Retics Instagram account a DM, and we'll get you on an episode. So it's an open invitation for anybody to come on, plug your stuff, talk about your perspective on things and where you're wanting, where your vision is, where your goals are, and hopefully we can help get you some extra support and uh, go from there. So anyway, guys, this has been awesome. Let me see. Oh, yeah, just to add, sorry, I wasn't keeping track of all my comments on IG here, but yeah, GC cows or G not GC cows, ternate Calico cows. That would be crazy. All right, guys, I'm logging off. Have a good one.